This is Alyssa Nickel, and I would like to welcome and thank everyone for joining. If you have just popped on, you may not have heard, but there are about 140 registrants. So we're about halfway there right now with people logging on. I'm super excited. This debate was organized by me and a great team. Monica, Stanislav, Cindy, and Jim. I had heard about the Braver Angels organization last year from a friend. And when the mascot retirement conversation continued to heat up, I thought that this organization would be beneficial for our community in Acton and Boxborough to help facilitate the conversation. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time today and also for your courage. I especially want to thank the Braver Angels team that helped us plan. They spent a lot of time with us emailing and on the phone and on Zoom calls. And I want to assure everyone that the conversation will continue after today.
Alyssa, are you ready for me to start?
I think so, Steve.
Thank you, Alyssa, and welcome debaters. We're so glad that you're joining us to discuss a very important topic we express in the form of a resolution. The resolution is resolved. The decision to retire the mascot incorporated adequate feedback from the community. Braver Angels debates are different. They are not competitive like political or high school or college debates. The biggest difference is that the spirit of our debate is a collective search for truth. To achieve that, we've created a process of our own with a few specific rules. Anyone can speak. The number one rule is that you must say what you personally believe. Listen to each speaker, and when ready to share your thoughts, share them in the context of what's been said before, just as you would in any conversation. When you speak, it is good to include facts, but what we especially encourage are personal stories, which help people know where you're coming from. And humor, how about that? Humor is especially important because this is supposed to be fun. We firmly believe that you can talk about anything, no matter how controversial, if you do it with the right spirit. So have fun, really. Be lighthearted, enjoy each other and yourselves. One way we have fun is our special way of showing approval that we call jazz hands. This is what it looks like. Try it now. Show me your approval. Good. So when you hear something, even if it's on the other side of the issue from the one that you're on, feel free to show your hands, your jazz hands, to let them know that you appreciate what they said, how it was worded, how articulate they were, whatever. When you want to give a speech, use the chat. And you chat to one of the whips to let them know whether you favor or oppose the resolution. On the participant list, you can look for whip before a participant name. During the debate, please chat only to one of the whips, either Dell or Beth, not to anyone else, including me. The whip will let me know you want to speak. Also, please keep your chat open during the debate so that the whips can easily contact you. We'll alternate affirmative, pro, and negative, con speeches. We'll start with speeches up to 3 minutes, then 2, then 1, or what we call on the topic, which doesn't have to be characterized as either pro or con. It's just sharing some additional thoughts on the topic. And I'll let you know when we're getting ready to shorten the speech length a little bit ahead of time. I'll keep time. Speakers, please keep your own time. If you reach 3 minutes or whatever the length of time is, you'll hear a timer. You can finish your sentence if you hear the timer, and then just one more. If you keep going after that, sadly, I'll have to mute you and move on. And please don't make me mute you. I mean, I don't want to do that. You don't want to be muted. So do keep your own time, please. After you finish your speech, I'll call for questions. When you want to ask a question of a speaker, use the raise hand button in the middle at the bottom of the screen of your computer, or on a tablet, click on either more or the 3 dots. And if you have trouble doing that, the whips are going to be monitoring the faces, the Hollywood squares on the screen. And if you can't get the raise hand button to work, just hold up your real hand and they'll let me know that you want to speak. These should be questions of genuine curiosity and interest. No gotcha questions designed to trap or attack the speaker. Questioners have up to 1 minute for their question, and speakers have 1 minute to answer. We'll take 2 questions and move on to the next speaker. And questioners, please avoid a kind of a monologue introduction to your question. If you appear to be giving a speech of your own, I'll interrupt you and I'll invite you to maybe give a speech later, but please state your question. The number 2 rule is all questions and comments must be addressed to me, the chair. Instead of saying, Mary, I don't know how you can believe that. Say instead, Mr. Chair, I don't understand how the speaker can believe that. In that way, what you say is depersonalized a little. In any case, when you're speaking, if I need to stop you, I'll mute your microphone, explain why I did it, and then we'll resume. Also, 3 more notes about Zoom. First, because of the way it's set up, it's hard for me to interrupt you vocally. So if I need to remind you about something, I may mute you briefly, redirect you, and then unmute you. Second, please keep yourself on mute except when you're called on to give a speech or ask a question. And third, during the debate, please don't use the chat to everyone function. Feel free to send a chat to the whips, but don't chat to the whole group. The debate needs to stay verbal and visual. So, remember jazz hands? Please give me your jazz hands if you're following so far, at least mostly. Yes? Good, thank you. Now, I want to say a little bit about today's debate in particular. As you know, we are embarking on a debate on a very intense topic. And not only is it an intense topic, it's a personal topic for many. Please keep this in mind as you make your points tonight. In order to make sure we engage in this as fairly as possible and that neither side gets preference, we'll enforce the rules a little more precisely than usual. That just means we'll hold you to time limits and enforce the correct phrasing for questions. Braver Angels debate is intended to be an extended conversation. That means that the key ingredient is responsiveness. Please listen carefully to what has been said before you and then respond to that. We'll ask that you engage with nuance and really respond to people who have gone before you rather than responding to labels or slogans that are not really the other side's position. I hereby call this debate to order. Again, the resolution for today's debate is resolved. The decision to retire the mascot incorporated adequate feedback from the community. Our first speaker in the affirmative is Amy Osenar. Amy, you have 3 minutes for your speech.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, I'm Amy and I live in Boxborough. I appreciate this opportunity to share my perspective. My family has been in Massachusetts since the 1600s. I'm a descendant of Sarah Averill Wilds, one of 19 who were hanged for witchcraft in Salem in 1692. Prior to that, she had been arrested for the indecency of wearing a red scarf. Colonial Massachusetts was not a safe space to be even a little bit different. My mother referred to Acton as a place that is unwelcoming to people who had not lived in town for generations. Sometimes that seems far from my personal observations, and other times her words echo as I hear generational Acton pride espoused in various political conversations, such as the one which brings us here today. I'm impressed that Acton Boxborough Students for Equity and Justice, ABSEJ, listened to the original Nipmuc inhabitants of this land before petitioning to retire the mascot. I believed them that the mascot is oppressive and harmful. Acton's Old Stride Right is the place where the N-word was once whispered to my beautiful Ethiopian American toddler. Acton and Boxborough are places where friends of color experience disparities in policing, school discipline, and political targeting. According to the Department of Education website, the suspension rate of Black students at AB is 8.7 times higher than the average of other students. Racism is a problem in this community. I read through the 113 pages of publicly available letters that were written to the school committee about the mascot decision. One theme which I heard through all of them was that we are a community that stands against oppression. I listened to the school committee meeting on October 15th, every word and all their body language. School committee members were heartbroken by the vitriol that they received from the community leading up to their decision. They carefully made a unanimous decision because it is right to stand against oppression. Their swift decision should have spared vulnerable students from an extended conversation, which in my opinion does far more harm than good. ABSEJ and school committee leaders are following the anti-oppression mindset that this community has always revered and made the decision to retire the mascot that has become a harmful representation of my mother's warning that this community is unwelcoming to people who haven't lived here for generations. Looking at what has happened at school committee meetings and select board meetings since the decision was made, it is more clear than ever that they made the right call to retire the mascot. This extended conversation has done more harm than good. Retiring the mascot is a small but necessary step toward letting all of our students, children, and residents know that we do, in fact, believe in liberty and freedom for all.
Thank you, Amy. And jazz hands for the speaker, if you like. Is there a question for the speaker? Cindy, you have 1 minute for your question. Please unmute and direct it to me.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My question, because the resolution has to do with the process by which the decision was made, I was hoping that the speaker could clarify what the process was that allowed for 100+ letters to have been written to the school committee. What kind of publications, what kind of public announcements there were to invite conversation prior to the vote. Thank you.
Amy, go ahead. You have a minute to respond.
The ABSEJ students began their petition in the spring, and then the school committee, I believe, invited the community. September 24th, sent a letter to the community inviting responses, and with a deadline, I believe, of October 14th, the day before their next meeting. And they had over 113 pages of responses that they got over email that they did share publicly later with the community.
Thank you. Is there another question for the speaker? Seeing none, the speaker is thanked.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I saw a number of hands raised in the audience.
Okay,
I apologize.
I don't. I'll tell you what, were you raised on the screen or did you raise your electronic hand?
Both. Their hands up. Joy and MPM are both raising their hands right now electronically.
Gotcha. Well, MPM, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Oh, again, unmute.
Yes.
Thank you. I was curious about where the extended conversation about the topic had really been taking place, other than Facebook perhaps. And is it wise to spare our students from these discussions, or do we need to be teaching them how to have these respectfully, like we're doing now?
Amy, you have 1 minute for your response.
Thank you. I heard directly from some of the ABSED students, and I'm not sure honestly outside of social media where the conversation, how broad that conversation was. I know that some people met directly with ABSED. And as far as sparing the students from the conversation, I agree that it's really important to have healthy conversations like this. I guess my concern about sparing the students was in seeing the emotional suffering that the school committee members had gone through based on what they received, the feedback that they received. And I remember hearing from at least one of the school committee members that it was going to be challenging to go to the grocery store anymore because the things that she had seen were so hate-filled and challenging. And I was grateful that, having seen what they did see, that they spared the students from that sort of vitriol.
Thank you. And since we only allow 2 questions per speaker, Dave, I'm sorry, we're going to pass on your question, but you can ask it later or even give a speech. So the speaker is thanked. And our first speaker in the negative is Vic Otero. Vic, you have 3 minutes for your speech.
My name is Vic Otero. I'm a Navy veteran who has lived in Acton for 21 years. I proudly cheered for my 4 boys when they competed as Colonials. Many of us don't understand how the decision was made to get rid of the Colonial without real feedback from the community. Most of the people that I know and respect feel this has been done unfairly and without concern for the people that are proud of being Colonials. So I guess that's the reason we are having a debate. Somewhere in the last year, someone decided that a mascot was racist and oppressive. The standard for making that decision was never made public. And anyone who challenged the change was labeled racist. It was a brilliant move, make a change, cut off all discussion in one powerful stroke. That type of behavior is not what this town is about. In fact, that behavior is opposite of what the Colonial stands for. When Isaac Davis led the Acton Minutemen to the North Bridge in Concord, he was standing up for the right of everyday citizens to have a say in their government. They were not letting anyone trample on their fundamental rights. That's the same feeling many of us have today. That handful of school committee members decided to make a change, regardless of what the citizens of this town think. Why wasn't the issue brought before the town meeting for discussion? Why did the school committee deliberately choose not to delay their vote in October, during a pandemic no less, to allow more voices to be heard on the matter? Why did the superintendent only read half of the first sentence of the rules for changing the mascot? If you'd read the end of the paragraph, it clearly says that decisions, quote, should not be influenced by personal prejudice, favoritism, political pressure, or temporary popularity, close quote. Perhaps the school committee would have decided differently if they had heard that. If they truly believed that their opinion reflected the will interest of the majority in the town, there should be no objection to hearing those voices. I've heard several different estimates for what will it cost to change the logo of uniforms and facilities. If taxpayers are expected to pay for that, shouldn't they have a say in the changes? This is a town of reasonable people who value diversity and differences of opinion. Why not trust them to make a wise decision that reflects all of Acton Boxborough? If the case can be made, then the mascot should be changed, but all voices should have had the opportunity to be heard. Racism is not okay. No reasonable person would debate that, but the silencing of a community with charges of racism because they disagree is not okay either. I am the son of 2 Cuban immigrants who came to this country in 1962. They left Cuba because they didn't want to be silenced and have all their basic freedoms taken away from them. The folks from Acton that are proud to be colonials feel like they are being silenced now. Too many people are afraid to speak up for fear of being canceled. That is not okay. There are 3 colonials buried under the monument at the center of town. They made the ultimate sacrifice so that we don't have to be silent. We ask that you respect what the colonials truly stands for and listen to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. Jazz hands for the speaker. Is there a question for the speaker? Mike Bloomberg, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask a question. I was wondering if the gentleman that just spoke, if you could ask the gentleman that just spoke, if he understands the difference between a colonial and a revolutionary, and if that had been something that had been thought about prior to any concerns being raised.
Okay, I'll direct that to you, Vic. You have 1 minute for your response.
Well, what I think is, the colonial to me is the folks that, the Isaac Davis, the guy that, fought for the government and to try to do exactly what I just said. That's what I see as a colonial, the colonial and the mascot. I don't see it as an oppressive figure and one that, is a racist figure. I think that in this culture today, we're very quick to be offended by all kinds of different things. And when does that stop, right? I mean, somebody could say that the Patriots are an offensive group too, and now they're getting rid of the New England Patriots because of that. And so I think that everyone should have the voice. And I think that everyone, in this town, if you take this to a vote and the vote comes out that we get rid of the colonial mascot, then I would go along with it like anybody else. I have friends here that are against getting rid of the colonial, and I have people that are for getting rid of the colonial. And in my case, doesn't change my relationship with those people. I mean, I don't think any less or any more of them. Everybody has the right to their own opinion. And in my case, I think that the colonial is something to be proud of, and that's why I spoke.
Thank you, Vic. I see Alyssa's hand up. Did you want to speak? Or ask a question, pardon me.
I have a question.
Direct it to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like the speaker to elaborate on what he sees is characterized as temporary popularity in the policy on naming. It was my understanding.
I changed my ringtone, so I didn't realize my phone was ringing. Let's go. What's that sound?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
actually, I wasn't done. It was my understanding that the reasoning behind the retirement decision was because the mascot was not seen as inclusive of a very changed student population. compared with the student population, which was 99% white in the 1960s when the mascot was decided upon.
Alyssa, was that where was your question?
So the question is, if inclusion was the reason behind the retirement decision, what exactly is the temporary popularity that's at question here in that naming policy?
Okay, the statement I made was basically the second half of the superintendent's quote that wasn't read or wasn't said at the time to the school committee members, that was left out. And what I said was that if he had read to the end of the paragraph, it clear that said that decisions, quote, should not be influenced by personal prejudice, favoritism, political pressure, or temporary popularity, close quote. That was what was supposed to be said as far as the rules behind changing the mascot or the name. So however you see any of those things there, that's what should have been read to the school committee before they went ahead and decided to take a vote. And had they heard that, they might have not voted on it, and they might have gotten more information from more folks.
Thank you, Vic. And you are thanked. The second speaker in the affirmative is Mike Blumberg. Mike, you have 3 minutes for your speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everybody who's joined right now. I apologize for not having anything prepared, but I prefer to kind of just speak from the heart if that's okay, and I'll keep an eye on the time. You know, my epitaph, I think, may read "Death by a Thousand Cuts," or at least it would have, until somebody shared with me the other day another slogan, which is "The days are long, but the years are short." I say that because, and this is the first time I'm sharing this in a large crowd, let alone 85 people that are on this call. But about 3.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with depression. Now, I've been living with it as long as I can remember, at least since the time I was 12 years old and had to leave my first home. I've been subjected to racism along the way, though I'm a white male. You may not know it. Sexism, any form of ism, to be quite honest, I have experienced along the way. I say this because in learning to live with depression, I learned that I need to go back. I get upset easily, and not like angry. I get emotionally drained and upset very, very, very easily because I tend to mirror other people's emotions too. And so I've had to learn how to ask myself, is this really important whenever I get upset? And through the years, I've been able to do that. So when I hear people say things like, it's not a big deal if people are taking offense too easily. Well, when you have people wishing you a Merry Christmas and your kids wishing you a Merry Christmas as you grow up, and you don't celebrate Christmas and you try to tell them, and then they say, well, Santa Claus this and blah, blah. What we need to understand is how other people feel. I feel the pain of people who say that they weren't informed and involved, but we don't get to be involved in everything, in every decision that we would want to be involved in. We don't get to choose which nostalgia will change when things in our town change, things in our family change. When we hear colonial, we're talking about colonists, people who are invasive, move to a new place. They inevitably, if there is life there, they eradicate the life and take over the land for their own. And that is not just true in the United States, but that's true in other imperialistic places across the world as well. And we have a very diverse society these days. Taking the time to hear each other, to understand each other is wonderful. But we also need to ask, when we think about my point of view and your point of view, whoever me and you are, what's the harm? what's the harm that it does to somebody who wants to keep the name colonial? Well, it hurts. It's something that's been part of their lives forever, or at least since they've been part of this town. And it's nostalgic. It represents the team their kids play for. I will finish up by simply saying the flip side to that is, what is the pain that's being caused to the people who have to live with what it means to be represented by somebody who has come in and eradicated your ancestors? The difference between a revolutionary and a colonial is a stark one, that if we took the time to understand each other and what it means, I think we would be in a much better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Jazz hands for the speaker. Is there a question for the speaker? Dave, you have 1 minute for your question, and please direct it to me.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for having me. I had a question for the speaker on if they were familiar with when the settlers came to this area and the ones who settled, and what the intent behind why we're called the colonials is, because the two are two distinct things. And my other question, if you'll allow me a second prong question, is it's important to take into consideration everyone's feelings. At what point, because we're all unique, different, diverse, have histories, at what point can you not even have a symbol or a term or anything that's not going to slightly make someone feel uncomfortable? I mean, there's just certain nuances to everybody. And at what point can you even have any symbol that's not going to potentially rub someone the wrong way? I think the intent is key. And although the impact sometimes is not what you expect, if you understand the intent, I don't think the impact will be as damaging.
Thank you, Dave. Mike, you have 1 minute for your response.
So as a Freemason, I understand a lot of revolutionary history. There are some nuances I'm sure I don't know about, but even when the towns had to choose between the names, I was familiar with. And I'll answer your second question, your first question, by also answering your second question. When you stop to ask yourself, did we ask, what's the harm? And what is the harm to picking a new symbol versus the harm of choosing a symbol that, once you know, is harmful to people? You can't say, well, my intent was this, because we are obligated to honor knowledge. When we learn something that is new, that is factual, we are obligated to honor that. And if we don't honor that, and that includes understanding that a swastika, while originating as a Hindu symbol, and I'm sorry to take this off the rails a little bit, but as, for example, it originated as a Hindu symbol, I believe, or Norse, I forget exactly which. But now, how is it used today? Somebody can say, I intended to use it the way it was originally used, but we know what it means. We know what certain symbols mean, and we know what names mean. And sometimes we find out later that we were wrong. And when we find out later that we're wrong, we're obligated to honor that knowledge as well. What's the harm you do to yourself by obligating to that knowledge versus the harm you're doing to other people by saying, well, it was well intended.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And I believe we have another question for Mike. This is Jeff's. And Jeff, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if you would ask the gentleman who spoke, I listened carefully, and he said there's no harm in coming up with another symbol, and I agree with him. And I wonder if he could comment on what part of the discussion was missing, and that was, we have a problem with this symbol, but find a solution for the other side that wants a symbol. I struck, and I wonder if he'd comment on the fact that no additional symbols were discussed, and that perhaps a lot of this dissent between the two groups would have been less and dramatically if there had been a good discussion about, well, why is this one bad, but what other symbols might not be so offensive, and come to a compromise and have a new symbol that could be released at the same time. I mean, I understand you want to make changes right away, but a few more weeks or months of having good discussion, maybe revolutionaries would have been the right answer, and maybe everybody would have said, well, we'll just move the symbol to something else. So I wonder if the speaker could comment about that, sir.
Thank you. You were right on 1 minute, Jeff. Well done. Mike, you have 1 minute for your response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the question. I'll start off by saying I don't think I ever said, nor would I say, that no harm was caused by removing the name. I understand the hurt that people feel and the harm that was caused to them on a personal level by feeling that they didn't have enough involvement in this process, one that has been something that has been part of their lives for a long time. I definitely think there was pain there. What I think is, what's the harm at the end of the day to me accepting that nostalgia is going to change? Change is the only constant in life. So my nostalgia is going to go away versus their living with constant reminders of the eradication of their population. So that's where I was trying to come from. If we think about it in terms of what's the harm to my neighbor, and what's the harm to me, and then how do we resolve it? So the resolution piece, I would say, comes in if we had that epiphany, if we could understand each other's pain first and foremost, and then talk about it in a constructive way. I would have loved nothing more than to see this town all rally behind the decision, and as a town say, okay, we are where we are. There's nothing we're going to change about that unless we're going to continue to put the town through agony. So let's all get together and let's figure this out together. The past is the past. How do we move forward?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And the speaker is thanked. The second speaker in the negative is Brett Gotthelf. Brett, you have 3 minutes for your speech.
Thank you. I'd like to start and hopefully end with these words: also, to, including, in addition to, as well as. These are words of addition and inclusion, which I hope is always everyone's goal. I'm not a lawn sign bumper sticker guy, because 4 words could never give you my thoughts on any subject, but if I was, I'd have a BLM sign alongside our Save Our Colonials. I've driven around town to see if that combination exists anywhere, and I haven't found it. I come from the protest generation, and RBG is my hero. I'm wearing her shirt. As such, I support completely the right and the duty of young people to question and push the limits of accepted thought with a petition just like this one. I would have hoped it would spawn a productive community debate about the subject instead of the rock fight that we're involved in now. I have no visibility into the inner workings of the school committee. I've heard accusations of manipulation and adult agendas, but with little to back it up. But I'm not sure we're always talking about the mascot anyway. There's a lot of talk about anthems and statues and flags, oh my, and now mascots. I think they're all proxies for more difficult discussions about race and ideology, since we seem physically incapable of having those. And because there's no real debate about those things in good faith, there's no room for nuance. The ideal scenario, in my opinion, was for the petition to generate some meaningful, hard, uncomfortable, but hopeful community discussion. I think what happened in practice, if not intent, leads us right here, where a large segment have dug into their respective sides. History is not the running cell phone video we like to think it is. Merriam-Webster's first definition of history is a tale or a story, and that's exactly what it is. I was taught that Lincoln was the great emancipator, and he was, but he also supported the idea of colonization, referring to freeing the slaves and shipping them off to South America or Africa. So Lincoln is the great emancipator, as well as, in addition to, including someone with great doubt that Black and white could live together, while also knowing that this was the opportunity to do what Jefferson and Madison had blatantly failed to do. Does that diminish my opinion of Lincoln? Quite the contrary. He was able to see the big picture in spite of his personal feelings. Isn't that what we ask Supreme Court justices to do? When I was a kid, I know I didn't hate the Vietnamese people. During the Cold War, whatever I thought of the Soviet Union, I didn't demonize Russian people. Something like Redskins is offensive on its face. That's an easy call. Neshoba just voted to go from chieftains to wolves. Not offensive, but I'm sure it had to do with cultural appropriation. These discussions are happening all over the country. Colonial is a description of who was here, and to me, you have to dig several layers deeper to get to colonization. Yes, of course, Isaac Davis, but a colonial is just a person who lives here. Was there genocide and destruction and disease associated with colonization? Of course there was. You're preaching to the choir, believe me when I tell you. But also, in addition to, as well as, there were patriots, Minutemen, farmers, innkeepers, Tories, free Black men, and run-of-the-mill colonists that were just trying to get through the day, just like us.
Thank you, Brett. Jazz hands for the speaker. And do feel free to give jazz hands for questions, as you really like the way they were worded. Is there a question for the speaker? Mike, I want to make sure nobody else has a question before I call on you. Okay, Mike, you have 1 minute for your question, and as you know, please direct it to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if you could ask the last speaker. It's dichotomies are interesting in life, and they're not always clean. But have you also considered that colonial, has the speaker also considered that the term colonial also means something to many of the people who are coming here from other countries that were once under colonial imperialism in the not too distant past, and that those memories may be even fresher for them and their families as they might be for First Nations that lived here and were systematically taken out.
Okay. Brett, you have 1 minute for your response.
Well, I hope from what I said that the answer is obviously yes, that I've considered that, and I do consider that. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't care what the resolution is. I don't care if we keep the mascot or not. I mean, the only problem for me is that I would have to get rid of half my wardrobe, and nobody wants to see me naked. Believe me when I tell you that, okay? So I'm much more interested in the process and the discussion and what this, I 100% support what the students have done, and they're, you know, sort of bringing this to light. I think, you know, people have mentioned before, I mean, we are now 67% white in this town, as opposed to the 90% white of Maynard and Stowe and Concord and all the surrounding towns. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're having this discussion under those circumstances. And I think that discussion is absolutely necessary and really important. So have I thought about it? Yeah, once or twice. So let's have the discussion. I think making a decision the way it was made, when it was made, without, I'm not sure exactly what the rush was. I don't know what the emergency was to make that decision,
Brett,
and
you need to
especially
get to your,
without a
last
replacement.
sentence.
Thanks.
Thank
I'm
you.
good.
Okay, thank you. John Peterson has a question. John, please direct it to me. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Steve. I wanted to come back to the process question of the resolution. And if you could ask the speaker what he would have liked to have seen in terms of additional process. And because the past, of course, we can't change. Also, you know, what could now be done in terms of process so that we can get to that discussion of the and the to and in addition to.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brett. You have 1 minute for your response.
So I'm I did say in my initial speech, and I had much more, I had to cut it down from about 30 minutes to 3 minutes, which is not really easy, especially for me. But I have no visibility, honestly, into the inner workings of the school committee and what happened and why, and all of the little sort of conspiracy theories that have bubbled up to the surface. I'm not interested in that crap. I'll be very honest with you. But I'm not sure why the decision had to be made kind of, early in the school year, sort of, I'm very active on social media, so I knew about what was going on. I read the petitions, I read the counter petitions, and I saw all of this developing. Most people in town had no idea that this was going on. None, zero. So what can we do to fix that? You can get 90% of the people to give a crap. That's first, but I can't do that. I don't know how you get people involved in what's going on. So I think it's a difficult subject to talk about, but I think sort of a community-wide discussion over months or years. I mean, I'm not sure if there was an emergency to take care of. So I'm not sure why the decision had to be made the way it was. And then now we're involved, it's a race and ideology are difficult discussions to have anyway. So now we have to undo the animosity to even get to that level. And I think that's unfortunate.
Thank you, Brett. Very good. And Brett is thanked. Is there another speech in the affirmative? If you would like to give a speech in the affirmative, you can chat to one of the whips, or since we're at a spot here now, if you just want to hold up your hand, I'll see it.
Mr. Speaker, we have names on the list.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Huari Tandon, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Gauri, like glory, but with a G.
Gauri, okay.
Yeah, or you can call
Thank
me
you.
Gauri. Gauri or Gauri.
You have 3 minutes for your speech.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. So on April 15th, I write blogs, and on April 15th, I wrote a blog called The Symbols of Harmony, which addressed some of the discussions that are happening today. And I'll give a gist of that blog. The blog is a little long. I can share the link for the blog for people who want to read it later. But the gist is that the symbols, the meaning behind symbols are the substance of the symbols. Like I'd like to quote President Obama from his book, The Promised Land, where he said that the substance of patriotism mattered more than that of the symbol. So at this point, when I'm looking at this symbol, the mascot, I feel that it is not creating harmony in our community. I'll give a little example. When we first moved, I'm an Indian, and when I moved first to this country, a lot of cultural differences were new. We celebrate Diwali, and just like recently Mike Bloomberg was saying that the swastika, right? Indian swastika is very different than how the swastika, Nazi swastika, is perceived here. So when we celebrated Diwali, we didn't have any resources. So what we did was we changed the background of our computer, and people came in, and our boss came in and said, can you please pull that down? Because that is hurtful to people. It's a symbol. We were quite shocked because our swastika, Hindu swastika, it was not meant to cause hurt or hate. So, but then when we thought about it more, we said in this particular context, the same symbol that creates harmony in India is creating hurt in front of people who don't understand this. We can go around, we can explain to people that this symbol is different. This symbol is different than what you think about. but it is still causing hurt. So what we did was that we continued doing our celebrations the way we do in our setting at our homes, while we understand Holocaust, we understand that people went through a lot of hurt, and we respecting them. What we did at this point, even though this is different, every opportunity that we get, we tell the differences in these symbols. We do respect that there are these differences. And sometimes these symbols will cause harmony, and sometimes these symbols will cause hurt. And what I'm noticing, that the symbol of mascot may not be representative of all the population that we have around here. And it represents, like some people have already said, colonialism in the rest of the world. Our community is very diverse. People are coming from all over the world. And even though the mascot, I totally respect the fact that Isaac Davis, he fought for the freedom of America. But I feel that at this point, we have to come up with some symbol which is going to be representative of the whole population.
Thank you.
That's where I feel we need a symbol of harmony rather than a symbol that causes hurt.
Thank you very much. Jazz hands for the speaker. Is there a question for the speaker? I see a couple. Daniel, you have 1 minute for your question, and please direct it to me.
Steve, I was wondering if you could ask the speaker whether the question right now is whether we're gonna find a symbol out there that doesn't hurt or offend some people. Is the goal here to find some perfect symbol that has absolutely no sensitivity to anyone based on where they come from? Or are we trying to find something that has factual basis for something that we believe in that has essential goodness? And I'm wondering if in the case of the colonials, if there really is factual evidence to suggest that colonials themselves were racist, or are they being perceived as being racist because of some extended association with them? Or if, because some people come from countries where the term colonialism is offensive, if we are now projecting that onto the Acton colonial, when in fact, the colonials are historical figures that were essential for the town and for the country being what it is today.
Thank you, Daniel. Gordon,
Yeah,
you have 1 minute for your response. Do you hear do you know the question or the questions?
Yeah, so I heard the question, and
Okay.
I feel that there is history associated with Acton, and there are other ways that there is a way, like the Acton Minutemen, and we have monuments in Acton that definitely respect people who started the Revolutionary War, and they worked in getting the freedom for Americans. However, I think it is really important that if just like Indians, when they came here, they gave up their symbol of swastika because it hurts some people. It is the reason we did that was because sometimes it is important in whatever ecosystem that we live in to be inclusive of everybody. And with more and more people coming in, this country is very diverse now. We have people from Africa, we have people from Asia, from Americas, and I think to be inclusive, we should try to find a symbol that is not hurtful to people.
Thank you. Dave, please direct your question to me. You have 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I have a multi-question response again, so I'll try to just cram them in. Sorry if I'm cheating, but my question to the last speaker would be, what if the demographics change again in 10 years? I mean, how often is this precedent going to be set? I mean, is this just going to be a thing? The school committee is almost a protectorate, or they're supposed to be in that document that Vic alluded to try to protect, the current students right now can't speak for everyone that's come before them. They can't speak for the businesses in town that pay for the school. They can't speak for anyone that's going to come after. And I also am curious, you take the Boston Celtics, for example. I mean, is that representative? Is everyone in this area Irish? Is everyone in that organization Irish? No, it's just a symbol that's known to the area, that's specific to the area, that people can rally around. It's not meant to cover everybody. It's just meant for you to buy into the ideals of. And if you knew that colonial was a derogatory term used against everyone in the colonies by the British, and that it's an underdog term, it's a rebellious term, it's a term to rise up and band together. It's being, like I just said, the underdog. And when people buy into that, no matter the color of your skin, orientation, anything, when you buy into those values,
Dave,
cut me off, sorry.
No, I want you to ask your question now. What is your question?
What if the demographics change?
Yeah. I can take the,
sorry.
I can take the question. So let me start with the Celtics. If the Celtics logo is causing hurt to anybody, it should definitely be looked at to change it. Coming back to your question, if the demographics change in 10 years, so we should try to be forward looking and find something that's neutral. And we are creative people. We can find something that's neutral. As to your colonial thing, if you look at my blog, I'll share my blog with you. Even though Americans got freedom in 1783, it still took, we still are not at a point where it, after even 100 years, Black people were not, there were multiple places where after getting independence, it took a long time for a lot of different demographics and a lot of people coming from different cultures to be able to vote. And we have to make sure that if that is creating hurt for a large segment of people, we should look at finding something neutral.
Thank you. The speaker is thanked. And now, is there another speech in the affirmative?
I think it's in the negative, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'd like to keep that affirmative negative kind of balance back and forth. Is there any other speech in the affirmative?
That was a speech in the affirmative.
Oh, pardon me. Dave, you're up. You have 3 minutes for your speech in the negative.
All right, so I'm an alumni of the school. I then went on to serve as an officer in the United States Navy. My parents still live in town. I have extended family in town. I'm just right down the street in Shrewsbury. So I just wanted to do a quick comparison and contrast because we're talking about the process here. Okay, so Shrewsbury, also the blue and gold, also the Colonials. November 16th, the superintendent sends out a letter to everyone in town, as many people as he can get to, stating that there's a petition to change the name. He creates a mascot ad hoc study group. Okay, he takes applications for it. There's an actual process, open-ended questions. It's going to be composed of 5 subgroups: current student, staff, parents, alumni, and admin. This takes a month. December 18th, application results come in. He's had to expand this group because so many people wanted to be involved. And their goal is to try to study and understand the intent and the background and the history of why the mascot was chosen that, and to try to understand what it might be now before they even make a recommendation to the school committee. So we're sitting here now in May, so we've gone on 4 or 5 months now, and this group is still researching it, They're studying it. In fact, it's been pushed off a little bit because the school committee is doing more appropriate school committee things like education and making sure that they have an override and making sure they have money. So let's compare this to Acton, all right? There was a request at the start of a hybrid year coming off of the summer. The full student body is not there. Athletics are not taking place. Only one student group is allowed to present. There was another one, but that's not for me because there's students involved to discuss why they didn't. 3 weeks compared to a month application. And now we are 5 months here in Shrewsbury. 3 weeks until the school committee is going to decide. There was a counter petition, which many people thought was going to be voicing their opinion, which numerically exceeded the other petition. And the school committee, after only 3 weeks and allowing themselves to speak their own thesis and then allowing the public to only cram in 1 minute of time, had the following quote. So keep in mind the policy that Vic shared and what Shrewsbury did, and listen to these quotes and see if this sounds like a process. Quote, "I'm not here to tally votes or pick the majority. If even one person feels marginalized by this mascot, then we must do our work to understand why. I encourage this committee to take swift action to retire the mascot." Okay, so you say that you want to study it, but then you want to retire it. Second quote, "I believe we need to move and move immediately." Third quote, "Let's retire the mascot. I don't want to take this conversation any further. It's not going to do any good. I think it's time to take a vote and put this to rest." Fourth quote, "We shouldn't make this palatable for the majority. Let's do this thing and be done with it. Change can't wait. It doesn't get any more urgent than this." And finally, from the chair, and I just heard that go off, "I don't think there should be any more discussion on this at all." So I hope you can see the contrast, the stark contrast in that entire process, and compared to what the policy that Vic alluded to, the spirit of it that says, don't rush these things, talk to all the stakeholders, get everyone involved, have a discussion, learn first, then decide. I think you can see from those quotes and the processes that that was not what was done here. It was snuck in under the cover of darkness.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Jazz hands for the speaker. I see 2 hands up. Jeff, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Yes, I would like to ask this speaker, as I did the previous speaker, if there was part of the process of discussing alternatives would have perhaps lengthened the discussion, had both sides better understand each other and come up with an alternative. Several other speakers have asked about, would any mascot solve the problem? But at least I think it would have extended the conversation. Both sides would have been work together. And I wonder if the speaker could relate to that.
Dave, you have 1 minute for your response.
Yeah, I definitely think that's an aspect of it. There's kind of 2 parts of this. There's people arguing over the history of it, but then there's people arguing over the process. And I think what is happening is there's people probably watching this and in the school system that won't touch this topic with a 10-foot pole because they don't want to be deemed a racist and lose their job and all kinds of stuff. But yes, if other alternatives had been presented, or if it had gone to the vote, or there was some sort of compromise, like in Wakefield right now, they kept they were like, do we want to keep the Warriors and get rid of the mascot? Do we want to get rid of the actual costume that looks like it was bought at a horrible Halloween store? Like, if there was just some sort of, let's stay Colonials, but maybe get rid of the guy that runs around, and there was a conversation that took some time, then yes, I think it would have landed better with a lot of individuals. But it's, here's what we're doing and here's what you're doing. And anybody who says contrary, you're a racist. And that's kind of and I can tell you the temperature in Shrewsbury on forums and whatnot, because of that, it's mild. People are respectable. People chat, people talk. Nobody's, calling people names. Nobody's silencing anyone. So yes, there's a stark difference between the processes and how this should have gone.
Thank you. Alyssa, let's see. Let me go to Claire first, since she hasn't participated yet. Claire, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Okay, hi, thank you. Could you, I just want to say, the colonials are a part of our history in this area, obviously. It's something that when I moved here was kind of a fascinating, it was kind of exciting to be near all these important areas and to learn more about some of the figures. It's a complicated history. Some of it is very amazing and something we can be proud of, and some of it is painful and hurtful. The colonial as a mascot is also a part of the history of this area. History evolves, and a mascot, as I understand it, is a symbol that people are expected to rally around. And in this case, the students at the school are expected to rally around it. It's meant to, they're meant to identify with it. So I'm just wondering whether everyone should have a say in what that symbol is, or whether the voices of the students should actually be centered in this. If the students if they feel hurt by that symbol and they don't feel that that symbol represents them, shouldn't they have a greater say than just the public at large and the people who historically were colonials in what
Claire,
that
I'm assuming you directed that to me.
Yes, yes, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have 1 minute for your response.
My answer would be what students and how many, because what you're not hearing in this whole process and what you may not have read from the emails, which if you go through them, is there's many students and many faculty and staff who want to stay the colonials and are equally bullied and ridiculed for supporting the colonials. And there's students who wear colonial gear and they're made to feel like they're not welcome. They're made to feel like they're ashamed. And so there's a whole other aspect of it that students have said, that faculty have said, that again, aren't going to speak up because they don't want to put their jobs and their reputation on the line and be associated with racism. But there's a whole vast number of students that aren't even represented in this conversation. So it's not dismissing the ones that brought it up. I applaud them for speaking up. That's what it is to be a colonial, to speak up and to stand up, which is odd because they're actually, the people that petition this are actually embodying what it means to be a colonial, like stand up for what you see. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to work, and you got to get everyone's buy-in, and not everyone's buy-in is involved or even heard.
Thank you, Dave. Amy, you've had your hand up a couple of times. I missed it. So we'll take a third question here. Please direct your question to me. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question to the speaker was about he mentioned appropriate school committee things like education. And I guess I wanted to bring back the previous speaker's comparison to the swastika. And I thought that was a good comparison because both symbols bring up, for some people, bring up a genocide, and that is, if that symbol is coming up for people, then they're not going to feel safe. And I'm wondering if, I think the school committee should be part of their work for things like education, to support education, is to help all the students feel safe, because nobody can learn if they don't feel safe. And would that not be part of the school committee's job?
Thank you. Dave, you have 1 minute for your response.
So on the points, and the school committee even alluded to this in their meeting, the school committee's job is to hire and evaluate the superintendent and to approve budget and policy. The softer topics about student stuff, that's embedded in the teachers and in families at home and upbringing, and nobody should feel unsafe. But I certainly don't think the name colonial and a swastika, I understand why you're trying to make that comparison, but that's like
Dave, rather than referring to you.
Sorry. Yep.
To me.
I would like to point out, Mr. Speaker, that apples to armchairs here. A swastika, if you took that around in public to 10 people, 10 out of 10 would be pretty bothered by it. If you said colonial, 10 out of 10 wouldn't think anything of it. It's not a racial epithet. It's not a 4-letter word. It's not on the surface a bad word, which means you have to look at the intent of it. And so if you understand that, hey, it's just colonial is a derogatory term used against everyone. It's a rallying cry. It's the values. I'm sure I'm coming up on my time, but I see other hands, so I'll probably have a chance. But, like Tom Brady's on the Buccaneers now. Never mind. I'll get to that next. Sorry.
Okay.
Mhm.
And Joy, I also missed seeing your hand, so we're going to stretch the rules a little more and let you ask one more question to Dave.
Thank you.
1 minute
Mr.
directed to me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsall. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. It's great to be here with everyone this beautiful afternoon. So I just wanted to comment on the speaker relative to the methodology of the survey that evidently, or petition that was sent out to the people of, I'm assuming, Acton Boxborough area. It sounds like there may have been some potential missed opportunities relative to how that survey was potentially developed, implemented, and essentially reported back. That's just one question is, does the methodology need to be reevaluated and potentially another survey sent out? And anonymity perhaps may be an element if it can be administered for the next survey. And then just a comment, the license plates on the Massachusetts cars says Spirit of America. So perhaps the new mascot, if it changes indeed, it could be Spirit of Acton Boxborough. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, you have 1 minute for your response.
Yeah, I definitely think the methodology, I think that's people feel like they were sold a bill of goods. It was like they were reached out to by the committee thinking they'd have a voice. And then, no one knows that these online petitions aren't going to be valued. And then they think they're voting, they think they're expressing their opinion in that way. And then it's completely dismissed. And then the other thing I think is the principle of it, if just in your personal life, if one person says, I think the sky's blue, and the other says, I think the sky is red, and you go, all right, well, this is an opportunity to just try to get some understanding about what the color of the sky is and why it's that color and all this stuff, instead of just going, yeah, I'm sorry that you feel that it's red. It's definitely red. Sorry, blue, it's red now. There's an opportunity, like you see in Shrewsbury, that this is an indicator that there's miscommunication about what the symbol means. And I wonder if the history of Acton's even being told to the students anymore, because they can definitely be proud of it, not offended. It's the total opposite. So I think there was an opportunity missed to just bring people together and educate.
Thank you. And the speaker is thanked. Is there another speech in the affirmative? And maybe 3 minutes seems a little bit imposing. So why don't we go to 2-minute speeches? Is there a 2-minute speech in the affirmative? So do you feel like everything that needs to be said in support of the resolution has been said? And it's okay for someone who has already given a speech to give another one.
Mr. Chair, Melanie on an iPhone has a hand up.
Okay, and also I see Bert has a hand up. So Melanie, can you hear me?
I can.
Good. I see you. Okay, you have 2 minutes for your speech. Please go ahead.
I didn't came prepared out of a speech. It's just some comments. So I think as a citizen for 20 years in Acton, I don't use social media a lot. Facebook, I don't use Facebook a lot. So I feel like as a regular citizen, I didn't have a chance to really get the full knowledge of this change, the mascot change. So I agree with one of the speakers about the process. In contrast to what Shrewsbury has done, the process in our town isn't adequate to me. It is not enough. Colonial is part of the history. We should take this opportunity to study, to talk, to discuss, to understand each other. I came from China, so I'm not here to say pro or against this mascot, but I'm just feel like from a country that we had a cultural revolution back in the 1960s, when my parents' generation was in their 20s. What happened in China was they threw away a lot of the traditional cultures, burned down a lot of things, destroyed a lot of things. At that time, everything was correct to them. But when looking back, we feel like, that's kind of, it's a period of time we really shouldn't rush. It's similar to, I think, what's happening now. I think we shouldn't rush this process, and we should facilitate most the citizens' feedback. I totally understand what people have said about the herd feeling they have experienced, but I really doubt about this process. I think we shouldn't rush. We should take this opportunity to understand the history, to understand each other, to have more communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Jazz hands for the speaker. So that was really a speech in the negative. And I think what we're going to do now, since there wasn't one coming forward in the positive, is we'll take speeches on the topic. So we'll consider that speech a speech on the topic. Is there a question for the speaker?
Mr. Speaker, there's Tris has her hand up.
Tris, I see your hand up. You have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I did have a quick question. I'm not terribly familiar with this entire subject, but I've heard a lot of secondhand information. So I'm neither opposed or for, but I did have a quick question. Was there anyone that provided professional input on the history of some of the colonials that actually helped to end slavery?
Thank you. Melanie, you have 1 minute for your response.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Chris, could you repeat the question for her, please?
Sure, Melanie, Mr. Speaker. Was there anyone that provided professional input on the history of some of the colonials that actually helped end slavery as part of this decision to abolish the mascot?
Melanie, you have 1 minute for your response.
I haven't done that such a study. I would say, can that be answered by anybody else who want to answer?
Well, actually, that would be a little bit outside of the rules, but someone could agree to give a speech later on and talk about that if they know about it. So we'll go that route. And Bert, did you have a question for Melanie?
No, I had what I hoped would be some remarks, and perhaps I could get an answer to a couple of the questions that were kind of crossing my mind, which are more in the general nature.
Okay, then I'll call on you as a speaker when we get a little bit farther on.
Okay, I had understood that you were now taking general questions and general comments at this point.
We are, but we're taking 2 questions for each speaker before we
Okay,
go
understood.
on.
Thank you.
So, Trish, you asked your question. Your hand is still up. Did you have another question? Okay. And Dave, did you want to ask a question of Melanie?
Sorry, I just took a quick bio break. No, I was going to help her. She said she wanted to know if someone else wanted to answer it. I'd be happy to answer it. I don't know if you'll.
Well, why don't you give a speech a little bit later on then to do that?
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else want to ask a question of Melanie? All right. Speaker is thanked. Is there another speech on the topic which could come from Bert? So Bert, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes for your speech.
Thank you, Steve. I've lived in Acton since, I guess, 1991. My wife grew up here. I'm originally from Virginia, from Richmond. So I kind of have a lot of personal history with mascots, statues, the absurdity, I think, of, people getting a little too wedded in the current environment to what was built previously that has a lot of history attached to it and a lot of political sentiment. I guess the question for me is one of trying to understand why graduates, people who are affiliated with Acton Boxborough Regional High School, have such an attachment to the mascot per se, as opposed to the high school. I'll give you an example from my own personal experience. I grew up in, as I said, in Richmond, Virginia. The name of my high school is John Marshall High School, and our mascot was the Justice. The Justice is named after Chief Justice John Marshall. When I think fondly back on my high school days, I think back on the people that I attended the high school with. I think back on the teachers who were there, the people who influenced my life. But I'm not as wedded to the mascot per se. If they were to change the name of the mascot to the Titans or to some other inoffensive name, I kind of question whether anyone of my era, and I got out of high school back in the late 70s, would be really bent out of shape over that. It doesn't quite seem to connect in a way that, at least to me, makes a lot of sense. I'm hoping someone can answer that, because as I look at what has gone on with the other high schools in the area, I see that most of the high schools that have had names that could be exclusionary or that attach to some point in history which is problematic have thought about it and have retired those nicknames. They may not have come up with an immediate replacement for them, but they have generally retired those nicknames, sort of trying to end the wounding that those nicknames might cause to their community. So I'm just curious as to whether anyone can kind of explain and connect the dots for me in that regard. Thanks, Steve.
He has hands for the speaker. Is there a question for the speaker? Dave, I'm going to wait just a minute to see if there's anybody else, and if not, I'll let you ask your question. Okay, Dave, go ahead. You have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Since the speaker's speech was a question, can my answer be the answer? Because he asked for a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so no, and I appreciate that. And I get what you're saying. Yeah, you care more about the streets of Acton, the teachers, the friends you played with and stuff and everything like that. It's not so much the colonial per se. The difference in Acton, though, right, is, this is like where the country started. Acton conquered Lexington. Isaac Davis is on the quarter, right? And you start to think about, for example, it's a slippery slope, right? If there's a fence to the mascot, what's next? They're buried in the town center. Is the next step going to be the graves are taken down? Is the next step going to be this whitewash, this washing of the history, which one of the previous speakers, I think from China, talked about, which is, if you're constantly just cleansing it, then there's never anything to rally behind. There's nothing to get behind. There's nothing to really stir up. So I understand the question and I appreciate it. And I know that, but then there's no history in a culture, a town, a country, a state. needs a little bit of a history, something that people can band together behind. So it's a little different in colonial Massachusetts, colonial America, because the schools and everything is tied to the area and the fabric and everything like that. I can tell you some good stories, but
You did have a question in there.
Okay.
And Bert, did you hear his question?
I think I did, and I'd offer first a little bit of a flippant remark. I grew up in Virginia, Dave. Virginia would love to rival Massachusetts, and I think by their own reckoning, they do in terms of where the country got started. So, you know, the point about history being the driver of what we decide we want to call ourselves and how we want to look at ourselves as we have moved further along the path. I still struggle to see why there is an obligation almost to pick a name or choose a mascot that has, whether you agree with it or not, but it has an impact on part of the community that makes them feel excluded. And when you look at the names of, for example, the schools that are in the dual county league or the Middlesex league, most, as I said, most of those schools have dropped the names of mascots that they feel would be exclusionary to other parts of the community. And certainly in Virginia, my mom used to teach at Stonewall Jackson Lee Davis, and they were the Rebels. They have since decided that they're going to change that name because they know that rebels in that particular context refers to the Confederates. And they don't want to celebrate that any longer because
Thank you, Bert. Thank
feel
you.
distant from their community.
Okay. Is there another question for Bert?
And Mr. Speaker, we have names on the list for speeches in the affirmative and in the negative.
Okay, thank you. We'll
Thanks, Steve.
next. Any other questions for Bert? Speaker is thanked. So let's see here. Hey, great. We got quite a few names on the list. That's wonderful, folks. So I think since we started with speeches on the topic, we'll continue with 2-minute speeches. And rather than going back and forth between pro and on the topic or con and on the topic or whatever, we'll consider all of them on the topic, but you can certainly speak in favor of or in opposition to the resolution. So the next speaker I see who hasn't spoken yet is Alyssa. Alyssa, you have 2 minutes for your speech. Please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am speaking in the affirmative. I believe that the process, the decision to retire the mascot did incorporate adequate community feedback. I know that the student group, ABSEDGE, who brought the petition forward, did so in the spring and was working with the administration over the summer. However, the school committee invited community input before they made their decision. And they did this not just by listing on social media. They did this by having a request in the local paper, the Acton Boxborough Beacon. They did this by sending an email to every single student at the junior high and high school. They did this by sending an email to every single parent. They also invited feedback by sending an email to alumni groups. So there were 3 weeks from this request for community input until the October 15th meeting. And I feel that just a day or so is all that's really necessary for someone to sit down and write an email. And I think we've heard before that the school committee received 700 emails. That's an awful lot of community input. I heard mention from a speaker that the ABSEDGE student group was allowed to present to the school committee, but the other side was not. And I just want to point out that this other student group in opposition to the retirement never made a request to present to the school committee. I'm sure if they had, they would have been welcome to do so. I also want to address the topic of the policy, which has been brought up by a couple of speakers. This policy F is the name of it. This is a policy that the school committee has on naming school properties, I believe it is, and obviously a mascot would be considered a property, but it's on a naming. So it shouldn't be influenced by the political climate or temporary popularity or pressure to name a school building after a particular person, but it doesn't actually apply to the retirement of a name, and in this case, the retirement of the mascot.
Thank you. Jazz hands for the speaker. Is there a question for the speaker? MPM, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
I can never unmute correctly. I just want a little clarification. The policy didn't apply. I just want to, that policy didn't apply. I'm just confused why he read it. He bothered to bring it up at all if it wasn't the applicable policy.
Okay. Alyssa, you have 1 minute for your response.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would say I can't really answer that question because I don't have any insight into why the superintendent would have read that during the meeting if it didn't apply. So I apologize that I can't answer that or provide any input.
All right.
Good question.
Is there another question for the speaker? Okay, if you have 1 minute for your question, please direct it to me.
Yeah, my first question was going to be that one, which is, well, if it doesn't apply to retirement, why do they even have the authority to do it? Number one. And then number two is, if you were aware of why the other group did not present, I mean, shouldn't that raise some red flags that there was not another group that requested? Because there was one, and that's not for me to talk about or discuss, but there was one. And I think the fact that they did not want to come forward is a pretty telltale sign. So I'm wondering if you knew that there was another group.
Dave?
Yep.
Please don't use the word you.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, if Mr. Speaker knew that there was another group.
I'm the chair, and you
Mr.
can say
Chair,
what
Mr. Chair.
you would like the speaker, or you would like the speaker to tell you, and then go ahead.
Yeah, like to speak. I would like the speaker to, I would like you to tell the speaker that, if there was another group, why weren't they encouraged? Why didn't they feel safe to come forward?
Thank you. Alyssa, you have 1 minute for your response.
Thank you for the question. My knowledge of the other group not having made a request came after the retirement decision. I was aware of the other group because I was aware of the counter petition that was circulated on change.org. So I would say that the other side, those who were in support of maintaining the mascot, were heard by the school committee because they were made aware of the petition and the number of signatures. There was a little concern about that circulating more broadly than the community, and not being able to ascertain whether or not there was a connection by signatories to Acton or Boxborough. And there were also lots and lots of emails that the school committee received from folks that wanted to keep the mascot.
Thank you. And the speaker is thanked. We're going to go to 1 minute speeches on the topic now. Would anyone like to give a 1 minute speech, pro, con, or just on the topic? John Smithers, you have 1 minute for your speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. try to get this out in a minute here. All of the things in the world I think we should be concerned about: war, famine, violent crime, uncured disease. It's unthinkable to me that team mascots receive the attention that they do. With few mascots today, while a few mascots today truly offend a significant number of people, the current trend of scrutinizing potentially offensive mascots has been blown way out of proportion. Examples of these acute offenses are numerous. The University of Alabama Blazers recently abandoned Blaze, who is a Viking mascot, for being too male and too Caucasian and intimidating to children. If those factors are truly overriding concerns, then maybe we should cancel Santa Claus. However, being too male is not always the problem. Sometimes the role is reversed. For example, the Pomona Pitzer California College Sage Hens. That's clearly sexist and offensive to all males. According to that standard, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish is also insensitive. I'm sure it's inconsiderate to all the world's Irish people who do not want to be associated with the mascot of some university located in Indiana. It also suggests that the Irish people condone fighting, a senseless and despicable practice. Are the California Angels and New Orleans Saints offensive to non-Christians? What about the Sun Devils and the Blue Devils?
John, those are examples.
Yeah, all right.
With a sentence.
If I may sum it up this way, isn't it easier to teach our children and our youth how to be resilient and not so easily offended by things, as opposed to just removing every potential harmful thing in their way, and try to uplift and empower them to be a little more resilient?
Very good. Thank you. Speaker is thanked. Is there a question for the speaker? Rebecca, you have 1 minute for your question. Please direct it to me.
Hi there, thank you. I'd like to understand how we can determine whether or not enough people are offended by something, because I've heard numerous people now say that it's clearly not offensive enough. So I'm not understanding that thinking. How do we decide who is offended? We had students come forward saying they were offended. In my opinion, that's all we need to know, but maybe they're looking for larger numbers or something more obvious. I really don't understand. Thank you.
Okay. John, you have 1 minute for your response.
Yeah, I think I would answer that question by asking it right back to you, Rebecca.
Let's not.
Mr. Chair,
no.
yep, Mr. Chair, yep, sorry. You know, the simple majorities rule. This country was founded on political principles that protect 49% from being governed by 51%. So I don't think there's a magical number there that should dictate whether or not a situation gets upheld simply by, majority rule or made by majority rule. So that's a tough question. It's subjective to everyone, I believe. I don't have a better answer for you. I'm sorry. To me,
John.
Yeah.
Okay. Alyssa, do you have a question for John? Okay, you have 1 minute. Please direct it to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would want to hear from the speaker whether or not a majority rule vote in a situation where you have a minority of individuals who are marginalized, oppressed, or not represented by a symbol, is a majority rule appropriate in the decision-making process in that case?
Okay, John, you've got 1 minute for your response.
Depends on the majority. Again, are we 51 to 49? Are we 75 to 25? It's difficult to put a number on that, I think. Again, my overall arching point would be, isn't it easier to preach resiliency and to help empower people to look past things that may be potentially upsetting to them, as opposed to disrupting entire processes and wasting resources on them?
Thank you. The speaker is thanked. Is there another 1 minute speech on the topic? Let's see. Cindy, you have 1 minute for your speech.
I've been in the town for over 30 years, and I have two sons who marched with the marching band through the high school. And I have had always shared an enormous amount of pride in our town. However, I think with regard to the question of by removing the mascot, are we whitewashing our history? I would suggest that there is more history than we have been taught. That that the textbooks that I grew up with, the textbooks that unfortunately may have been used at the time that my kids were in the school, may not have addressed some of the additional darker underbelly sides of the history that is currently making members of our population uncomfortable. And so rather than considering that we are whitewashing the history, I would argue that, or I would suggest that there is more history that needs to be recognized. Further, I believe that a mascot in the end should welcome everybody to the football game and welcome everybody to all of the community events. And if we have a mascot that is not welcoming to a significant part of our population, then that is something that we as a changing demographic in our community that we need to recognize and appreciate.
Thank you, Cindy. That was a long sentence, but it wasn't one sentence. Jazz hands for the speaker. Okay, is there a question for the speaker? I see a couple hands up. I suspect those were already up to give a 1-minute speech. Daniel and Brett, is that correct? And MPM, is that correct? Or did you take your hand down? Okay. Any questions for Cindy? All right. Let's see, Daniel, you have 1 minute for your speech. Please go ahead.
Okay, if it pleases Mr. Speaker. I'm hearing a lot about changing demographics, and I do believe that it's important to recognize that Acton is a more diverse town than it was back in the 18th century. However, I don't think we should necessarily hold that against the colonials. The fact that demographics is changing shouldn't really matter in this case, because our history is founded by the colonials, and yes, the majority of them were white, and that's not the reason why we celebrate them. The fact that they weren't people of color should not be a reason why we vote against them either. And secondly, I don't think it's a litmus test whether somebody today is offended. And I don't agree that we need to make this a democratic vote. I think that we should be basing our decision on logic here, whether or not the colonials as a people in Acton were predominantly racist, evil people that we don't want to associate with, or are we trying to disassociate ourselves from them because they were all white and we're not all white, and some of them had something to do with slaves at some point, but that's really not what we're recognizing them for. Most people back in that time frame, they did a lot of things that we probably wouldn't want to do today, but that's not why we celebrate them. And as
Thank
other
you,
people,
Daniel. Thank you.
Okay.
I think we've got a couple more people who want to give a 1-minute speech. We're also getting close to the time when we are going to do what we said we would do and adjourn on time. So the next, we'll not have any more questions at this point, but we will let these two people speak. Franny, you have 1 minute for your speech.
Hi, I think I came down on the negative side because I think the fact that so many people have so much to say means we didn't get adequate feedback. I thought it was a good decision. I think that I believe that if people were feeling pain or discomfort with the things that Colonial brings up, and I don't think it's just about the behavior of our local colonials, we need to listen to them. And I didn't pay attention, actually. I wasn't that involved. I think I expressed my opinion, but I didn't pay attention to the reasons. But what mattered to me was that there were people, even a minority, who felt pain from that. But then being at this point that we are now and afterwards, I think it's really important to also be listening to people who might be feeling pain, even if I don't think that it matters what our mascot is or whatever, or I have a different belief about symbols or whatever it is. I just want to listen to people and say and listen to what they feel. So I'm not trying to express opinions because, as I said, I believe the reason for changing it was a good one. But I just think that evidenced by people wanting to say things now, we didn't have enough time to discuss it.
Thank you, Franny. Jazz hands for the speaker. And our last speech will be by MPM, who has not been able to be a speaker yet. You have 1 minute for your speech. Go ahead.
Not a speech, it's just a comment. And I need you to know that I'm a teacher in Acton, and I was very hesitant to come into this group at all. And I'm terrified to speak now, to be honest, because I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't want to get lambasted. And the most important thing to me is that my students, no matter where they fall on this issue, can speak in my class. So I've been deliberate about not bringing it up. And I think a lot of teachers have felt like that. And so there's been no discussion. And I'm disappointed in our school and I'm disappointed in our town because that's what we should be teaching our kids. We can't avoid these hard discussions. And it doesn't feel like we had it in the town. And I know we haven't had it in the school. I want my kids to learn how to respect people that disagree with them, even when it hurts. I want my kids that my son went through, and I've coached for years, everything I own says colonials. I want kids to be able to talk about, yeah, I'm sad to give this up. And I want them to listen to the students that say it hurts to see that. And we didn't have that discussion. And in my opinion, we missed an opportunity to teach our kids how to address one another on hard things. And this isn't the only hard question they're going to have to deal with. And may I ask a question? Do you do this for students?
Do we do debates for students? Absolutely. If you want to have us back and have the students have a debate, we'd be glad to do it.
I have found that when students listen to one another and hear one another's stories, even when they disagree, it takes the anger and the rage that has descended on this town out of the equation. And I feel like the process left a lot of people feeling like they couldn't speak. And now we're left dealing with the fallout, and it's hard.
Okay, thank you. Brad and Amy, I apologize. We're at a point where we really can't have any more speeches. I would certainly, and I'm sure others would have liked to have heard them, but we really have to move on at this point. So at this point, the chair is ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. That doesn't mean we're done, but we do need to adjourn the formal debate. Is there such a motion? Anybody can make that.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. And let me say one more thing. Ray, I saw your message about you wanted to speak and didn't get to speak, but I never actually saw your hand raised. Maybe I just missed it. I apologize if I did. So we are adjourned, but please stay for a few more minutes. I'd appreciate answers from a few of you to two questions. One of them is, what did you learn? And the second one is, what did you enjoy? So raise your hand and I'll call on you. What did you learn? What did you enjoy? MPM, we ended the debate and we'll start the questions with you.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but Mrs. Tandon, I didn't know that about your symbol. Thank you for sharing. Mr. Ware, I just want you to know any school that's called the Justices is awesome.
Thank you.
Very good. Ray, you said you didn't figure out how to raise your hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to raise my hand. That's why I feel excluded.
If you have a student in your family, they'll be able to show you. But did you want to say anything about either what you learned and or what you enjoyed?
I learned that we have a lot to do as a town. We're not listening to each other. And if we really try to really listen, we're getting defensive. I think the process was a problem. I agree with Franny. Empirical data says the process was flawed. If we're honest with ourselves, we have to accept that. I was moved by the last speaker, who's a teacher. I hope everybody listened and does some soul searching. She was afraid to speak. There's a lot of that in town right now. A lot of that in town. And for us to deny that, we are really hurting ourselves. I've lived in town for 36 years. And by way of background, I want to share, my father was a Muslim immigrant. My mother came from the southern part of the United States. I lived in the Middle East for 6 years. I went to a Catholic high school, a Catholic university, and I'm Jewish. I have experienced a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and I dare say most of the people on this call have not, but yet they feel they can judge. So, and the woman from China who spoke to, until you've been someplace else and really understand, it's very, very hard and inappropriate to make judgments about other people. And we have a lot of that. Sorry.
Thank you. That's gone beyond what.
Yes, I understand. I'm sorry.
Okay. Is there someone else who would like to answer those questions? What did you learn? What did you enjoy? All right, Gory, you're next.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing both sides of the debate. And I do hear that there were processes, there were emails that went out. I didn't get an email about asking the question, but I'm sure if that was the process that was followed, it must have been. But I agree that when there are so many people on both sides of the debate, I'm glad that today happened, because I have heard outside in my community and otherwise that this is a very divided issue, and people are on both sides of the debate, and I was really glad to hear both sides.
Thank you. Imaja, I hope I said your name correctly.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Gauri. And it's Himaja. Thank you so much for asking. And I'll be brief. I really enjoyed hearing both sides too. I agree with Gauri. I agree with everyone here that we need to have more civil discourse. But I think the biggest thing that was left out of this conversation that was very apparent to me was that we didn't hear from a single current student. And that, I think, is something we need to do better with moving forward. And I'm really glad someone asked the question about whether we do these types of things at school. And even, just speaking from that perspective, I think that at the end of the day, our students need to be represented and they need to have a voice in these forums, because at the end of the day, they wear the mascot. They're the ones that cheer for AB. So their voices are paramount to creating change. So I hope moving forward, we incorporate their voices in these forums.
Thank you. Vic, what did you learn? What did you enjoy?
I enjoyed the whole forum, listening to everybody on both sides of it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you really listen to what I was saying, was essentially just let's get the process right and let's hear from everybody. And then at the end of the day, whatever that decision is made, everybody will feel good about it. And then we can all kind of get along better. I will tell you that the amount of fear there are, I mean, how many people do you think here that spoke have businesses in this town that are really passionate about this? Well, there's a reason why they didn't come and speak. The reason they didn't come and speak is because they're scared to death that if they say something, no one's going to go into their businesses anymore, or there's going to be people that are going to, just whitewash them out of the business, right? And so, being here for 20 years and having 4 kids through the system, they love being colonials. People are still wearing colonial stuff, and it's a shame that we can't work together to figure out a good resolution.
Thank you. I saw a message that Chari wanted to speak, or was it Charlie? Probably Charlie. Charlie, what did you learn and what did you enjoy?
I learned that our school committee should change their decision not to consider this issue, because there are many people, many of them on this forum, who have a lot to contribute to making Acton united again, which it is not at the moment, and that's a shame.
Okay. Daniel, what did you learn? What did you enjoy?
I really enjoyed the process. I like this obligation to speak to you and not call out somebody as a direct attack. And it makes us all very civil. And it allowed me to appreciate and listen and better appreciate what people were saying. Bert said something about growing up in Virginia. Gori talked about India, and I have a better appreciation for many people's perspectives on all this and their sensitivities. And I like this debate forum. The only thing that concerns me at the end of the day is I hope that we make decisions not just based on feelings, but we have some sort of rubric whereby we make a decision today and we would again make a similar decision in the future. So that, because a lot of other people, Dave and Vic and John, made other points like, where does it end? Where is the slippery slope? And are we using some sort of logic to decide these things, or are we just doing it based on feeling? So I think this forum helped us. And as Charlie said, I believe that there are many stakeholders that need to voice their opinions for us to really understand these issues.
Thank you. So we're at 1 minute past the hour, and we still have a little bit more business to attend to here. So I regret that Brett and Vic were not able to hear your last, what did you learn, what did you enjoy? And John, same way, or Dave, pardon me, Dave. I do want to say that I hope you all have enjoyed this debate, learned something from it. If you are new to Braver Angels, please visit us at braverangels.org. Dale is putting the address in the chat to see what else we do and see if you might want to be part of it. I would like to thank all of the participants for bringing your best selves to this debate. And thank you to the organizers, particularly Alyssa and the Whips, Dale Kimbler and Beth, who worked to make this an enjoyable experience. And now I'm going to let Dale tell you a little bit more about how we're going to ask you to evaluate the experience. Over to you, Dale.
Okay, I've just put a link in the chat that will take you to an evaluation form for this debate. And you might want to copy that and paste it into something on your computer or on your phone so that you can still get to it after the debate. So that link will be active for about 24 hours. And we certainly want to get your feedback on this event and how you participated in it. And that is about all I have to say. I'm going to keep this window open for a little bit to give everybody a chance, but I have enjoyed flipping this. I've enjoyed being part of this and enjoy very much listening to your points of view.
Thank you, Dale. And I want to say one more thing. If Braver Angels, this sounds like something that you'd like to get more involved with, you could become a member for the exorbitant fee of $1 a month. That's what the membership fee is. Of course, if you wanted to donate more, you could, but become a member, it's $1 a month, $12 a year. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. Dale's going to leave the link up a little longer. We do really appreciate getting your survey results, and it doesn't take long to fill it out. So everybody, have a good week. And if you want to have another debate, give us a ring.
Thank you. Steve, did you want any of the planning team to stay on, or will we follow up with you via email?
If you have some things you'd like to share with us now, this would be a convenient time to do it. We always do a little debrief at the end. So while we're leaving the link up for people to, copy down the link to do the Qualtrics survey, sure. If any feedback you'd like to give us would be welcome.
So I guess my feedback is I feel like it went really well, and it sounds like even additional forums are going to be welcome and hopefully beneficial. So I'm looking forward to some additional workshops in the future, one-on-one conversations. I'm really excited that there's someone who's excited to have this come into the school. That was a phenomenal way to close the debate, the formal part of the debate.
Thank you. Beth, you're muted.
Hey, Steve, thanks a lot for bringing it together. I appreciate having a conversation with you. Quite frankly, I was a little skeptical at the beginning on how this might go for somebody like myself. I'm relatively thick-skinned and handle things pretty well, but at the end of the day, no one really wants to get lambasted over a mascot for sure, right? And so I hope that everybody kind of listen to everybody, and obviously there's a lot of folks here, and I can tell you that if like, for instance, if the AB football banquet wouldn't have been between 3 and 5, okay, you would have had everybody in that group here. There would have been 50 more people in here, and fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, most of those people are on the side of keeping the mascot. Okay, across the, you go to the LAX program, same thing. I mean, you go across all the programs, you see a lot of that, and I'm not trying to put down any students here that are on the other side, because quite frankly, I just think that we got to get everybody's voice, right? And at the end of the day, you're gonna make a decision, and whatever that decision is, I'm gonna live with it, and it's not gonna change my life one bit. And I appreciate what you guys do. You take a lot. I mean, I know this is a volunteer thing, and it's really commendable that you guys do all this, and I'm just, I went to the Naval Academy, and believe it or not, this kind of thing even exists at the Naval Academy, believe it or not, right? I mean, the Naval Academy has an Indian that's Tecumseh, and he's on the T court, and we basically honor his bust in the middle of T court at the Naval Academy. And for no joke, 100 years, they've been painting that mascot to honor him on football games, for football games. And they really do them up, and they really do a great job. Well, guess what happened this year? Somebody was offended over the fact that they were painting Tecumseh, and they outlawed painting Tecumseh. They've been doing it for 100 and something years, and now all of a sudden that happened, right? And so it happens. It's happening everywhere.
I hate to break in here, Vic. I'm sorry. I hate to break in here. I'm going to have to close this meeting really, really soon. So if we have any other, we can't keep debating this. The debate part is over.
Right. And it may even be we're using one of the national accounts for Braver Angels. Somebody else may need to use this. So
Yeah. So thank you all. If anyone would like to pursue doing a debate in the high school or doing another debate or any kind of event, just get in touch with us. You know where we are.
Yep, we know where to find you. Thank you.
Yeah, you do.
Wonderful. Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
team.
Bye-bye.
Bye.